Guam Legislature is now back in session. We have a few bills left on the agenda. Two of them are Senator Rodriguez's. And so we'll start with Senator Rodriguez. You're recognized.
Afade, good morning, Mr. Speaker. I've moved to place Bill 53-33 as substituted by the Committee on Health, Economic Development, Homeland Security, and Senior Citizens on the third reading.
Any objection?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Bill 53 is an act to adopt the rules and regulations governing the sanitary operations and inspections of temporary workforce housing pursuant to subsections 21.102 of Chapter 21 and subsections 26.305 of Chapter 26A, Title 10, Guam Code annotated. These proposed rules and regulations was sent down to the legislature from the Department of Public Health and Social Services through the Administrative Adjudication Act. And what we've done, Mr. Speaker, is just like the bill that we discussed briefly on Monday, Bill 45, we had two public hearings on this measure. We've noticed that the public hearing that was conducted by the department didn't include much participation from the public and stakeholders. And even in the first public hearing we had here, didn't have any really input from the community. And so what we did was go out and seek the stakeholders we believe would be most affected by this proposal. And so that's what we've done. We had a second hearing and also had a markup session. The committee did also have a markup session. And all the concerns really that were raised by stakeholders were addressed in this markup session is reflected on this substitute version. I think if I may, one of the I think most important sections here that we felt would have a big impact on companies that do intend to bring in temporary workers in anticipation of the military buildup was the additional fee that this proposal was, the initial proposal was calling for. And so after much discussion and clarification, it was determined that already these companies that do operate workforce housing would already be subject to other fees by other government permits, and so that was removed, and a small flat fee was included to replace that. Other sections also include certain sections here that really conflicted with existing statute or definitions that were defined in statute, really needed to be cleaned up and have that match what is here in this proposal. And so I believe, Mr. Speaker, that this proposal now is something that we should move forward with and support. And I ask my colleagues for their support on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Rodriguez. Any senator wish to be heard on Bill 53 as substituted by the committee? Any senators wish to be heard? Senator Espaldon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have a couple questions, perhaps. I read through it a little bit, and maybe I didn't catch a couple of the issues that I just kind of wonder about. And one is, if I may ask the good author, if there are any temporary workforce housings right now in play, and if the good author would just...
I believe the question is, are there any temporary housing? I believe there are, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, and then the follow-up question to that is that does this do these new rules, once we adopt them, would they apply immediately, or do they basically take effect next June or come this June when they apply? Because we're only a month away in essence from June, and just wondering what kind of challenges that the existing companies who have temporary workforce housing might face.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, these rules are effective immediately. However, we know that from discussions with the Division of Environmental Health, that the rules that we're implementing here will be prospectively, and so when it's time for their renewal, they will be required now to comply with what the adopted rules and regs will be.
So in essence, he's saying that if we adopt it now, it gets signed into law, prospectively, bottom line, this calls for a June application for a permit to operate a temporary workforce housing. And if the present workforce housing does not meet the code as it is, or as it will be implemented, then I guess the concern is what happens to those companies and the workers who are presently in temporary workforce housing that may not live up to these standards. I was just wondering if there's any kind of buffer of any kind to allow them to come up to speed.
Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I completely understand and appreciate the issue that's being raised. I know, though, from the track record of the department and what they intend to do is not really shut down or to end these existing workforce housing, but they would work with these companies that do have workforce housing to allow them to comply with the rules, and so unless there's an amendment that is proffered to perhaps delay it, I think I'm pretty confident that the department and the companies that do have workforce housings will work out a plan to be able to comply with these. And we had Department of Labor involved in the discussion and markup as well in the public hearings. The Guam Contractors Association was also present, as well as I think a few different companies, major companies that do have workforce housing presently and who do intend to expand that once the buildup occurs.
Is that satisfactory?
And I appreciate that. I mean, only because he said that the public hearings were attended by, I guess, the groups, and especially the I don't know what they call it, construction sector. Because the concern, of course, is that if they do not comply and if public health does shut these temporary workforce housings down because of non-compliance, and they only have 1 month to get them up to speed if they are not in compliance, then we have a problem. And do I have a solution? It seems to me that you almost want to give them at least 1 year, those who may not be, but I don't have a written amendment at this time. But I just voiced my concern along those lines, and if we ever hear, and I've looked through to the records, there is no public input voicing that concern, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't at least consider it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Senator Espaldon. Any other senator wish to be heard? Senator Mary Camacho Torres.
I have a point of inquiry to the author. In looking at the revisions that were made, I just want a point of clarification with regard to the renewal fees, the fees for renewal of sanitary permit. In the first version, there was a listing of costs that was on it was apportioned to the size of the facility, and I noticed in the amended version those costs as broken out prorated according to the size was taken out. I just want a point of clarification. What was the rationale for deleting that from the original draft?
Senator
If I may
Rodriguez.
ask, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I yield to that question. The initial proposal was that the department wanted to charge these temporary workforce housing companies fees as it relates to the size of their complex. However, it was brought up that these units already are required to apply for and pay for sanitary permits, and so what we're doing here is just putting another government fee on top of a process that they're already undertaking now that requires them to come up with fees and other costs. And so it was determined together with the Department of Public Health, and then the committee report also has a breakdown of how we came up with that $38 fee, because really that is all it should cost them for the renewal of a workforce housing permit. And so the other fees that they're required to pay and obtain from the department still stand.
Senator Torres, does that respond to your question? Thank you. Any other senator have any issues or comments on Bill 53? Senator Espaldon. Yeah, no, I'll recognize you. We'll take a short recess. Senator Espaldon?
Thank you for that recess, Mr. Speaker. I was able to clarify something in the rules, or the proposed rules, with the good author, and I believe it's very workable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other senator have any concerns or wish to comment on Bill 53? If not, I'll invite the sponsor to close. All right, on the motion to send Bill 53 to the voting file? No. There being no objection. Bill 45-33, Senator Rodriguez, I see that your proposed amendments have been circulated.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know we set this legislation aside on Monday. There was a concern with the definition of a therapeutic massage establishment. There was two conflicting definitions, and so what I'd like to do is offer an amendment to line 1 through 3 on page 8 of the bill. I believe our colleagues should have a copy of this. There's two amendments I'd like to do, Mr. Speaker. So now on page 8, line 1 to 3, therapeutic massage establishment will be defined as follows, which shall mean a business which performs the manipulation of the superficial tissues of the human body with the hand, foot, arm, or elbow by massage therapists licensed by the applicable professional licensing board of Guam, whether or not such manipulation is aided by the hydrotherapy, including colonic irrigation or thermal therapy, any electrical or mechanical device, or the application to the human body of a chemical or herbal preparation for compensation. And so again, Mr. Speaker, these rules and regs, just to reiterate, are proposals that came directly from the Department of Public Health and Social Services. These did have two public hearings and also a markup session to address the concerns that were raised. And the good senator from Barrigada, I know, raised this concern about the definition that it conflicted with an earlier section of the proposed rules. And so what we're doing with these two amendments is to have those consistent.
Let's deal with the First Amendment.
Okay.
Okay. On the amendment on page 8, lines 1 to 3, any senator wish to be heard on the amendment that's being proffered by Senator Rodriguez? Senator Tom Atta, I see your hand up. And I see Senator Bloss was one of the ones with concerns on Monday. But I'll start with Senator Atta since his hand was up, and I'll allow you an opportunity to review the amendment. Senator Bloss.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have if the author would yield, in defining therapeutic massage establishments, it says that it is a business which performs the manipulation of the superficial tissues of the human body. And I guess the term superficial is defined as off or relating to the surface, the external or the outward. And so, if I understand correctly, when we talk about hydrotherapy, or when we talk about hydrotherapy, including colonic irrigation, simple term is enema, that certainly does not deal with the external part of the body. We're starting to now get inside the body. So that doesn't seem consistent. Manipulation of superficial tissues, but it includes whether or not such manipulation is aided by hydrotherapy, including whether it includes enemas. So maybe if you can help me understand how this ties
Senator
in.
Rodriguez, do you wish to yield to that?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to be very, very honest with you, I don't, these were definitions that came from the professionals, and I'm not going to pretend to be a professional in this field, and so I understand what the good senator from Manilao has brought up, but so I don't have a clarification. If we like, we can again set it aside, and we can get those individuals from the Division of Environmental Health to be able to clarify that.
Why don't we take a short recess? Tom Atta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think maybe to address the apparent inconsistency, by using that adjective it is a business which performs the manipulation of the superficial tissues, if we remove the adjective superficial, and that we're just simply referring to a business which performs the manipulation of the tissues of the human body, either with the hand, the foot, or aided by hydrotherapy, including colonic, irrigation, then I think that removes the inconsistency. And for me, I guess that would be fine, because I'm just not going to go to a therapeutic massage establishment to get a colonic irrigation, and that would take care of that. So my motion then is to delete the word superficial on the third line of the to amend the amendment by
On the Atta amendment, any senator wish to be heard? Removing superficial. Any objection to the amendment? Seeing or hearing no objection. On the amendment as amended, Senator Bloss.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you continue on down the line with the amendment, after including colonic irrigation or thermal therapy, semicolon, any electrical or mechanical device, if you're looking at the flow of the statement, and the utilization of the semicolon there, one can infer one of two things: that the thermal therapy is done by electrical or mechanical device, or that there is some procedure, some other procedure that involves electrical or mechanical device. And I think that this is a little bit unclear. And while I don't want to assume, or maybe I need to assume that this is in reference to the type of thermal therapy that can be employed, I would like to make an amendment to the amendment that would remove the semicolon after thermal therapy and put the words "that utilizes." Again, I'm going on the first assumption or the first inference that we're referring to the type of thermal therapy. But I just don't want the confusion to be that that is in fact another type of procedure other than thermal therapy and hydrotherapy and colonic irrigation, of which, sir, I understand and I believe you had nothing to do with.
Any senator wish to be heard on the Bloss amendment? Did I see your hand go up, Senator Atta? Please, get recognized.
Well, again, now my read of this is that maybe the appropriate amendment should be to remove the semicolon and to and insert a comma, such that then that we're talking now about the manipulation being aided by hydrotherapy or thermal therapy or I guess when I'm thinking that, this electrical mechanical device is something like your acupuncture, where they stick the needle in and then they run a charge to it and it massages you. I don't know. I feel kind of like duck out of water here. I'm just kind of going on my experiences. I've had thermal therapy where they put the the infrared thing for a deep tissue massage, the electrical device like the acupuncture, and then I've had the mechanical device, the chiropractor, where he's got this big, you have to hold it with two hands, massager. So I mean, those are all manipulation aids.
Mr. Speaker, while I do have no experience in the area, his question and his inquiry and his proof goes right to the point I'm trying to prove here. It can be read one of two ways, and I don't think we want that to happen. I think there has to be some, it has to be clear. It has to be clear as to whether or not are we talking about the types of devices to be employed for thermotherapy, or are we talking about another type of procedure, or manipulative procedure, or invasive procedure for that matter? So I bring that amendment, proffer that amendment to spur the discussion and hopefully so that we can get some clarity on what is truly the intent or what we're truly trying to define here. Again, as I had stated, the good senator from Manila, his statement goes right to the point that I'm trying to make here. We sit right next to each other, but we have differing ideas as to what this statement actually means. And I think that needs to be clarified.
On the amendment to remove the semicolon.
Can I ask, Mr.
You want a short recess?
Short recess, please.
Senator Blas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to be able to withdraw my previous amendment, but then proffer a new amendment.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, after discussion, and I want to thank the good author for being able to get a hold of Tom Nadeau from Public Health, and in discussion with my good senator from Manila. The new amendment would be to read thermal therapy, discard the semicolon, that includes the use of any electrical or mechanical device.
Is that clear to everybody? We're removing the semicolon and including the words that includes the use of. Is that correct, Senator Blas?
Yes, sir.
Any senator wish to be heard on the amendment? Any senator wish to be heard on the amendment? Any objection to the amendment? Thank you very much, Senator Blas. Anything else?
That's it, sir.
Thank you. On the amendment as amended, on the amendment as amended, on the main motion, Senator Rodriguez, we're back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the other amendment now that we have established what the definition of a therapeutic massage establishment, I would like to delete on line 10 through 16, page 16. Item V.
Everybody see the amendment that's being proffered by Senator Rodriguez? It's on page 16, lines 10 to 16. For those of you that are looking for it on the amendment that was passed out, it starts on the first page and goes on to the second page. Anyone wish to speak on the amendment being proffered by Senator Rodriguez? It starts at the bottom of the page to delete 4404V.
So yes, I'm sorry. It's not reflected properly on this amendment. So it is on page 16, line 4 to 10.
It's the deletion of section 4404V.
Yes, and that deletion is being done because we already defined it in the earlier section of the rules.
Any senator wish to be heard on this amendment? Senator Ada? Okay. Any objection to this deletion? On the main motion, just a second. I see you, Senator Ada. You'll be the first one I call. Senator Rodriguez, do you have anything else? Senator Tom Ada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just, on page 17, I noticed that a new form of photo identification is being added as an acceptable form, and that is on line 20, the use of the credit card with a photo. And I have a credit card with a photo, but the photo was when I was first issued my credit card at the age of 21, and you couldn't tell the difference between then and now. So, I would move to delete item 5 there, that the credit card with photo would be an acceptable form of photo identification.
On the Senator Tom Atta amendment to delete credit card with photo as a acceptable form of identification. Any objection? Any, on the main motion, anybody else wish to be heard on the bill? We're on the main motion now. Senator Tina Munoz-Barnes.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, on that same section 4407, and as far as the photo identification, it has the Government of Guam ID, Guam driver's license, United States military identification card, passport, and I know that some of those have other than any of these, because you're asking for just one ID. Maybe an employer identification card, like a employee badge, might help. If I can just confer with the author, please,
Oh,
to add that.
we'll take a short recess.
Talk to the author and have further defined the issue that I was, the concern that I was working with, and it is added on, so I appreciate that time, and I support the bill.
Thank you. Senator Blas, I was reminded by the clerk that when we broke on Monday, you actually had the floor, and so I need to just make sure that...
It's done. Thank you.
Okay. I just had to clear that. Any other senator wish to be heard? Any on the main motion? Senator Blas, I'll recognize you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, Mr. Chair, the great thing about wanting to make some changes into some existing statutes, sometimes it gives us an idea to be able to go back to the existing statutes and look as to whether or not it truly serves the purpose that it wants to serve. I'm going to go to, first off, what just jumped out right at me on page 14, line 21. It says, in a swimming pool, any person employed for compensation or otherwise at the facility who's in charge of its operation and or maintenance. This appears to be all-encompassing. Am I correct in assuming this? Employed for compensation or otherwise. I'm a little bit confused with or otherwise.
Senator Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the intent is to is not to have everyone who works in a swimming pool have require them to get a health certificate. It is really just for the person in charge. So if it's for a hotel, it would be the general manager or whoever the general manager designates who is in charge of the swimming pool facility.
Senator Blas, is that satisfactory?
If that in fact is then, if you look at the definitions for many of the other facilities and who it's going to, who this is going to affect, it's the same with institutional facility, cosmetic establishment, hotel, laundry or dry cleaning establishment, eating and drinking establishment, and food establishment. Is that then the same? Will that be the same for all of those establishments as well?
Senator Rodriguez.
My understanding, Mr. Speaker, is that these, what the good senator referenced, are in a food establishment are actually the employees who have direct contact with food, and so with the pool, it was brought up during the hearing, the public hearing as well, is that it's really meant now for just who is responsible, who is in charge of that swimming pool in that facility. So it's not meant to be a lifeguard or anyone else who works there in that swimming pool facility.
So then my question goes back to then it would just be the general manager or the manager of the eating and drinking establishment, the food establishment.
Yeah. So if they now, those general manager of the food or drinking establishment are actually serving, then they are required to obtain a health certificate.
Is that
Okay. Okay. So who's required now to get it? Is it just the general manager, or is it manager plus the employees?
No, for the swimming pool, it's just whoever's in charge. If it's the general manager, then it's just a general manager. If the general manager or the management designates the maintenance superintendent to be in charge of that pool, then it would be. Because when they go now and apply for a sanitary permit, they would have to indicate who is, the responsible. Because whoever name they put on that is now going to be required to also obtain a health certificate.
Senator Blas?
If the good chair is comfortable and recognizes, then okay. I thank you for his clarification on it.
Senator Tometa.
Well, I guess, just following on with the point that has been made by the gentleman from Barrigada, if we take a look at, all the other items here, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's referring to individuals who are actually doing the work, who are coming into contact. In the laundry, any person who handles soiled or clean linen, in a hotel, any person who cleans, handles prepackaged foods, etc. In the cosmetic establishment, any person who singes, shampoos, etc. So in a swimming pool, I just, quite frankly, maybe what will be more easier to accept is that any person employed for compensation or otherwise to the facility who operates and or maintains the facility, but for the person who is in charge, the supervisor or the manager, he probably doesn't even come down to that swimming pool at all, and it really should be the guy that's down there that's sent down there to change the filter or whatever. So why would number 7 be different from all the previous, where it refers to individuals who are actually actively doing the work? It just seems rather inconsistent.
Senator Rodriguez, do you wish to address that concern of Senator Etta?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try my best to. right now, we don't have, there's no requirement for if you operate a hotel and you have a swimming pool, or a condominium, you have a swimming pool, no one is required now to obtain a health certificate. And so what this proposed rules and regs is doing is now requiring that whoever's in charge of that facility is, must now go through the process of obtaining a health certificate. And so I understand that now if we're going to require the people that actually go in there and clean the filters or work there, that's a whole different story that was not discussed and vetted through the public hearing process.
Senator Tom. Any other senator wish to be heard on the bill? On the main motion, the bill as substituted. On the bill as substituted, the main motion, any senator wish to be heard? If not, I invite the sponsor to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank our colleagues for the discussion on these on this proposal. We know that we really did our best to try to get the input and the community feedback on this proposal. We had 2 hearings and also markup on this, and so I feel pretty confident that we've answered the concerns that were raised, and just like any other proposed rules and regs, once it's adopted, if there's a need to revisit, the department would have that ability to do that, and also us here would have the ability to come in and make those changes. But I think it's something that that we should pass, and I ask my colleagues to please support the measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On the motion to move the Bill 45 to the voting file, hearing no objection. I saw Senator Nicholas, if he wants to discuss Bill 63. Senator Snicks, you're recognized on Bill 60-33.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to place Bill 60-33 on the third reading file and be afforded an opportunity to speak on the measure, Mr. Speaker.
On that motion, any objection? You're recognized, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Bill 60-33 is an attempt to revitalize the long-standing tax review commission that we've had in our government since 1990. This commission has existed in various forms and has done different kinds of work over all these years with respect to the authorization that the federal government gave the government of Guam to consider a tax code of its own creation within certain parameters. A lot of the work that's been done over the years is in various locations. It needs to be reviewed and recompiled and put into historical context. The work that these previous commissions have done over the years has a lot of value for us going forward, and we need to be able to see where we've been in order to understand where we need to go. So what Bill 60-33 intends to do is reconstitute the Guam Tax Commission by repealing and reenacting Chapter 11, Title 2 of the Guam Code annotated. And what this bill intends to do with respect to the Tax Review Commission is 2 things. The first and most important, I believe, is it creates a new position within the Review Commission that would allow for a member of the Guam Women's Chamber to serve on the Tax Review Commission. All previous iterations of this Tax Review Commission did not have a specified slot for a woman's representative, so this would allow for us to have a woman's business representative from the Guam Women's Chamber to be a member of the commission. The second thing that this bill would do, Mr. Speaker, is it would specify exactly what the commission's objectives are, what we're trying to do and the work that we're trying to accomplish. The current law that we have to work with does not specify in detail what the commission's responsibilities are, what the outcome is intended to be, or what the objective is. It kind of says that we're going to create this commission and it's going to be able to look at these things, and then it kind of just leaves it open-ended that way. We want to narrow that so that we're able to understand what the deliverables are expected to be from this commission. And so those deliverables are, they begin on page 7, line 18, line 17, duties. And the commission shall compile the records and work products of previous commissions to include the commissions formed under executive orders in 1986, 1987, 2003, and Public Law 20-181, 22-74, and 27-56. Just in that one section alone, Mr. Speaker, we can see there's been a whole lot of effort put into this review commission over the years. But if we really step back and ask ourselves what has been accomplished, it's very difficult for us to really pinpoint. And the reason is because we have not had any kind of streamlined way of being able to go back into history and look at the work of these commissions. So what this initial section will do is it will say the duty of this commission as formed in Bill 60-33 is to compile that historical record. So we can see all the work of our forefathers on this issue and understand what they've been evaluating, what the concerns were that came up when they were looking at these things, what their hopes and aspirations were at the time, and what challenges they encountered that caused us to be at this point today where we still have the authorization, but we have not made the progress. Section B is to review Guam's tax structure and tax policies, including tax exemptions and credits, which may include a comparative analysis of such policies in relation to other jurisdictions within the United States. That basically means that we're going to look at our tax code and compare it to other tax codes and see, is there a way that we can construct ours that may be more advantageous for the people of Guam as compared to other jurisdictions. We are to review the procedure and policy options available to the government of Guam with regard to delinking from the U.S. Internal Revenue Code under subsection 1271 of Public Law 99-514. That's the section that the federal government, that's the section in which the federal government authorizes us to delink. And so what we need to do is go in there and really evaluate that authorization, say, okay, they're letting us under what conditions? I don't think anybody in this room can really, with certainty, outline what conditions were specified by the Internal Revenue Code and that public law. So we need to be clear on that. If we're going to do any delinking, under what terms? That would really help us to understand what the consequences may be if we do this, because there may be terms and conditions attached to delinkage that we may not want to accept. And so if we're going to even move in that direction, we might have to actually go backwards and have those things amended, but we don't quite know what those are yet. And so this commission will study that and report back to the body as to what those are. The commission will review estimates of the fiscal impact of potential changes to Guam's tax structure and policies. This basically means, Mr. Speaker, that if we're going to increase or decrease any tax or any entitlement, exactly how is it going to impact our finances in the government? Are we going to be revenue neutral? Are we going to be bringing in additional revenue? Are we going to be bringing in less potentially? That will be a mandate of this commission to review any estimates of the fiscal impact of any changes. The commission is to develop informational reports and recommendations regarding Guam's tax structure and tax policies, procedure and policy options available to the government with regard to delinking from the U.S. as deemed appropriate by the commission, and the fiscal impacts of potential changes to Guam's tax structure and policies. Basically, this is the key here for everybody to be able to be on the same page. Not only is the commission going to do its work internally, it's going to be required to prepare reports and to issue these recommendations to the various leadership structures on the island. In all this context, the commission will evaluate developing a uniform tax code for Guam. We currently mirror the federal tax code, and then we have our own local taxes, such as the gross receipts taxes, the property taxes, and all of these are kind of melded together to create what we have as our current tax policy. But with this commission, we'll be able to develop a uniform tax code for Guam and move that forward as a proposition for the legislature and the governor to consider. So instead of just saying, you know, we have these local taxes in this one area and we have these federal mirror taxes in this other area, and we can't do anything with the federal mirror and we cannot really construct our local taxes to affect that federal mirror, now we'll be able to say, you know what, we're going to look at the whole thing as one big tax system. and see how we can make sure all the different moving parts are complementing each other and able to operate in sync. So, for example, we'll be able to make sure that we link tax information in the federal income tax code with tax information in the local tax code. So your taxpayer identification number, which was one of the things that we talked about in some previous sessions, can be used across the board to offset refunds to taxes that may have not been paid, and vice versa. And lastly, we're supposed to transmit a copy of all these reports and recommendations regarding tax policy to the governor and the speaker of the legislature. So to make it very clear, Mr. Speaker, this commission is not going to be doing any work that's going to immediately impact the community. The commission is going to be doing a lot of work that's going to be for the consideration of the legislature and the governor. And so I asked my colleagues to consider supporting this. One of the other changes that we do make has to do with the constitution of the commission in terms of how often it's put together. Currently, the commission is supposed to be put together every 4 years. It's not specific as to who is in charge of doing all of these specific things that the commission is supposed to do, who's accountable for compiling these reports, who's accountable for doing these studies. And so what we do is we narrow it down also to say every time there's a legislature is elected, the commission is to be constituted. That way, let's say, for example, right now in this current calendar year, we were to form the commission under the existing statute. It would have a 4-year mandate to operate. But that becomes very cumbersome when in between that 4-year mandate, the legislature could change, the leadership could change. And then what happens when we have all these people who were sitting on this commission for 4 years, all of a sudden being moved out of the commission because they're no longer elected officials, or because the elected officials at the time no longer want to constitute the commission of those particular members. So to make it far more simple, every 2 years, every legislative term, the commission will be constituted. So members can be appointed, new members can be put in, old members can be replaced. If the senator who is the chair of finance is not re-elected, then whoever is elected as the new chair of finance will be the one responsible for continuing the commission's work. So it narrows the timeline for the commission to be constituted so that it can actually create more continuity. One of the things that we see, for example, in our legislature, in our respective committees as senators, is every 2 years we have our committees, we can reconstitute our committees, but the committee work does have consistency. You can go back and look at the Committee on Finance, and then we can find information tracking back to all the chairs of the Committee on Finance that have preceded me, because the committees are very, very clearly delineated, and they're able to keep a compilation of their work. But because we have a 4-year timeline for this commission, because we don't specify who's responsible for continuing the work of the commission, and we don't specify who's responsible for providing the administrative support of the commission, that's why we have since 1990, so many commissions created, but a very difficult time trying to track its history and understand what has been accomplished in the past. So we're trying to create a tax commission that would have a greater degree of consistency, a tax commission that would include women as members of its deliberative body, and a tax commission that would have a specific set of goals and objectives to be able to accomplish, all of which will be at the service of Ilasaturan Guahan and Imagalahin Guahan for them to consider and move forward if they so choose. So I ask my colleagues to consider supporting this bill. I look forward to any deliberation we may have to improve the construct and intent of Bill 60-33. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the bill as substituted. Main motion. Any senator wish to be heard? On the main motion, Senator Frank Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I want to commend the author and the co-sponsors to the bill for taking this step to being able to try to basically deal with our tax structure and taxes. I do have a question, and I've been mulling and going over the whole bill, and maybe I'm missing it somewhere. But page 7, line 5. It says basically, I'll start with line 3. If any vacancy occurs in the appointed membership of the commission prior to the dissolution of the commission pursuant to 11-109 of this chapter, the appointing authority shall appoint. I have not found in who the appointing authority is, and maybe that can be, if the author of the bill can yield to, and maybe point out who it is. I do recognize that there are members and their different responsibilities, but I just basically, because you're the chair of the committee, doesn't necessarily make you the appointing authority unless so designated and so recognized. So I think there needs to be some clarification as to who this appointing authority is.
Thank you very much. Senator Nicholas, do you yield to that question?
I do, Mr. Speaker, and just to clarify, that section is intended to ensure that if there's any vacancy within the commission for whatever reason, let's say a member resigns for personal reasons or what have you, the intent is to authorize the appointing authority to appoint replacement members. And the appointing authorities are outlined on page 5. It actually begins on page 4, subsection 11104 membership, but it continues on mostly to page 5. So for example, page 5, line 7, number 4, an economist selected by the chairperson with a master's degree or doctorate in economics from an institution of higher learning accredited by an accreditation agency recognized by the U.S. Secretary of Education. So in item number 4, for example, it would be an economist that would have to meet that particular criteria appointed by the chairperson, who would be the chair of the Committee on Finance. However, for item number 5, a certified public accountant also selected by the chairperson from among 3 names submitted by the Guam Society of Certified Public Accountants. So let's say this year we constitute the commission, they submit 3 names, the chairperson selects one of those 3, and that one individual resigns for whatever reason. The appointing authority can replace them with the other 2 individuals who are nominated by the society. The society can also nominate a 3rd one if they wanted to, but that would allow for us to have continuity in membership because by nominating 3 names, the society is basically saying these 3 people are 3 people that we would like to have sit on this commission. We choose one, and then if that one person has to resign for whatever reason, we still have 2 others that we can replace them with as appointed by the chair.
Senator Blas. Thank you. On the main motion, any other senator wish to be heard? Any other senator wish to be heard on the main motion? Any other senator wish to be heard on the main motion? Seeing no hands up, I'll invite the sponsor to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and just and thanks to my colleagues for considering this bill. This has been an effort since 1990, and so if we can make progress in moving this issue forward, this is one of those legacy issues that I think would be a very good thing for us to come back to our people and say, hey, you know what, we've made progress on this, and it would be a very, very significant thing for us to actually evaluate our own tax code for our own benefit. One of the reasons why this is so important, this is such important work for us not to give up on, Mr. Speaker, is right now with our current tax code mirroring the federal tax code, the federal government can make whatever changes they want to their tax code, and we automatically have to adopt those changes. Now, what's very problematic about that, Mr. Speaker, is that the federal tax code is being amended by Congress, in which we have no vote, and we don't have any kind of influence as to how the voting is going to turn out over there. And their considerations are taking into context the needs of the entire nation, the United States of America. And we are then taking that tax code that's designed specifically for the biggest economic power in the world, and we're adopting that tax code as it reflects as it relates to the economy and the island and the people of Guam. And that's very problematic, Mr. Speaker, because what may be in the best interest of the United States of America from a tax policy perspective may not be in the best interest of the territory of Guam. But unfortunately, because we mirror the federal tax code, we have to adopt that very same code. And so what happens is when the federal government adopts any kind of a mandate that has any kind of cost, we have to adopt that mandate. If the federal government cuts taxes on any kind of line item in the tax code, we have to implement those tax cuts. And when we implement those tax cuts, we then have to go back to our people and say, you know what, we have less revenue for this year. Are we going to cut health, education, or public safety? And all of that is outside of the realm of our control. The federal government is going to be making tax policy based on what the federal government needs to accomplish from a tax policy perspective, regardless of whether or not that is going to cause any kind of benefit or harm to the people of Guam. So we need to continue this work that was started over so many years, and we need to understand what the consequences may be if we do delink. We need to understand what the benefits may be if we do delink, and we need to craft a policy that is going to be of benefit to the island and the people of Guam. And that's a task that our forefathers have left us since the time of our path to self-governance, and it would be a huge and very momentous occasion for us to finally be able to step back and say we have crafted a tax policy, a uniform tax policy across all tax policies here on the island of Guam that is specific to and for benefit of the island and the people of Guam. And that's something that I think we need to be very excited about, something that we need to embrace. And it's a job that I'm sure this commission will undertake with great enthusiasm. And I would just like to mention who would constitute this commission, who would sit around the table and come up with this new tax policy and all these other goals and objectives. We have the chairperson of the Committee of Jurisdiction over Tax Policy Matters. We have the chairperson of the Committee over Budgetary Matters. We have the minority leader, all from the Legislature. And then we have an economist. We have a certified public accountant. We have a banking professional. We have a member of the Guam Chamber. We have a member of the Guam Women's Chamber. We have an attorney specializing in tax law. And we have an individual designated by Magalahan Guahan. We also look forward to the participation of ex officio members. We are hoping that we can have the delegate's office, our Congresswoman Bordalio's office, provide a representative to weigh in on the issues. The speaker can weigh in at any time on these issues. The public auditor, the attorney general, the director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation, the director of the Department of Administration, the director of BBMR, the administrator of the Guam Economic Development Authority, the chief economist of the Guam Department of Labor, and any additional individuals that we may need to appoint to the commission. Now these ex officio members, Mr. Speaker, just to clarify, they're not going to be actual voting members in the commission, but they'll be able to weigh in with their expertise. So for example, if the commission says we're going to adjust or consider adjusting tax policy A, Reverend Tax can weigh in and say, you know what, we need to figure out how we're going to logistically implement that. DOA can weigh in and say, you know, we need to figure out exactly how that's going to impact our existing account structures, and maybe we need to restructure our accounts that are established already. BBMR may weigh in and say we need to figure out exactly how that's going to affect the flows that we currently are anticipating on a calendar basis, because the money under that current tax code comes in May, but with that change it may come in April. So all of those things need to be considered, not just what kind of a tax policy do we want to adopt, but upon adoption, do we actually have the logistics in place for us to properly implement? So I know that over the course of the hearing, we have had some oppositional testimony from some of these agencies concerned about their participation, but actually, Mr. Speaker, it's very important that they be in the loop with exactly how we're going to be rolling any of these things out, so we can understand whether or not we have the proper logistic structures in place to effectuate what may potentially be a new tax code for the island and the people of Guam. So we have a lot of professionals who are going to be weighing in on these issues. We have a lot of experts that are going to be a part of this commission. And again, at the end of the day, when all the work is said and done, the only thing this commission is going to do is offer a recommendation. It'll be up to Legislature to adopt. It'll be up to the governor of Guam to sign off on it. and only then will we be able to say that we're moving forward with any of the work this commission does. So it's very bureaucratic, it has a lot of layers, but it's also a very big and important issue. It has to do with our tax structure, and we need as many minds at the table as possible to work on it, but the work also needs to get done. Because the alternative right now is just riding along on the federal mirror, and again, any kind of tax policy the federal government adopts will become our tax policy, whether it helps or hurts us. And that is being at the mercy of not knowing what that tax policy may be in the future is just, it's very risky, and it's a danger to the fiscal health of the island and the people of Guam. And at any point in time, the Congress can change the tax code at any point in time, and we must adopt those changes. So this is important work, and there's a lot of good minds that are going to be brought to the table, and I ask my colleagues to please consider supporting this so that we can take this necessary step forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Nicholas. I apologize. Before we make the motion to send this down, I understand that Senator
Yes.
Blas may have a question.
And I beg your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, and I know that I've already spoken, but okay.
Well, I'll recognize you.
Thank you. And I want to thank the good author for what he just, in his closing, if you will, which also then brings more to the concern that I have here. With regards to a certain section actually found on page 10 of the bill, section 11109, the dissolution of the commission. You know, Mr. Speaker, I have to agree totally with the issue and that was brought up with the author and the concern with regards to the continuity of the work of this commission. And I'm quite concerned, really, if in the dissolution of the committee, as a result of the end of the legislative term, is that necessary? And then, really, what happens to all the work that was done prior? You know, I granted and I recognize that there are a lot of times you can't hold one body, you know, to the works, hold any future body to what you're doing today. But this is important. And I fear that as a result of dissolving the commission at that point in time, you may lose you may lose traction on what you're already starting to gain. You may lose some very critical information. Also recognizing that while it may be at the end of a legislative term, there are already mechanisms in the bill to ensure that there is some type of continuity, whether it be the change out because the individual is no longer the chairperson of the committee, or it was, you know, this or that had happened. There is the mechanism for continuity prior to this whole section of this dissolution. And so my concern here is in this section of the dissolution. While it says we're going to reconvene it, it's going to be reconvened in the next legislative term. Again, I fear that we're going to lose traction on many of the work, all the work that needs to get done. And so, can I have just a 30-second recess?
Please.
Can we just And Mr. Chair, in this short recess, got with the author, and he's going to make the appropriate amendment to be able to address the concern that I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the retiring speaker for a very good suggestion. The intent is to have as much continuity as possible. However, we need to balance that with not forcing any future chairman to adopt or to have a whole set of members that they may not want to work with, or they may want to reconstitute. And so I do have an amendment to page 10, that's subsection 11109, dissolution, to strike from the word shall on line 22 to the end of the word term and the comma. I'm sorry, to the word to. From the word shall to the word to. and place in that same section, that same area, the word may. So we'll say the commission may be reconstituted.
Okay. On that amendment? On the amendment, no objection?
And then a second amendment, Mr. Speaker, on line 23, after the word and, insert the words shall be.
On that amendment? No objection?
So the new section, Mr. Speaker, reads, the commission may be reconstituted and shall be reconvened by the chairperson in the following legislative term pursuant to subsection 11104 of this chapter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. On the motion to send the bill to the voting file. On the motion to send the bill to the voting file. Thank you. We stand in recess until 2 o'clock today.